So today's lesson is a response to a question, or I heard that some people would like to know more about unity and metaphysics, and I thought, great, this is an opportunity for me to share it. So, do you want the good news, the good, better, best news? I'm not planning to go through all of these books today in our class. This is a class. So we may touch upon a few things from these books, but I wasn't planning to cover all of it this morning, unless you packed a lunch and you've got time all afternoon. But what I do want to start with is this affirmation: let there be light. Elizabeth Sand Turner, a longtime unity minister and a woman that wrote several books that really pull together Bible interpretation for unity, always said, whenever you get ready to open the Bible, the first thing you should do before you open it is to affirm, let there be light. Meaning, let there be illumination in my heart and mind. And then she said, when you close the book, when you're done, you should say, and there has been light. So let's say this together. Let there be light. So that's my hope today, is that I will be able to provide some illumination for all of us, a little bit deeper understanding. And, there's been a lot of conversation worldwide in the unity movement lately, and even in our church, about how do we describe unity? How do we introduce it to new people? And, what are some of the words that we frequently use? Positive, practical, progressive, metaphysical. Thank you, Dawn. I planted you. And some people say, well, what does that mean? Is that helpful to put that on the sign? I don't know what it means. Or is somebody driving by, are they going to know? And so I thought, well, we want to make it easy for people to know what we're about. We want to be able to, talk about it and share it with others. And, and it kind of reminds me of a conversation that I overheard in a bookstore. One day I walked in and I heard the customer go up to the store clerk and say, where is the self-help section? And the clerk said, well, if it's a self-help section, I guess you ought to find it for yourself. So I thought, well, okay. With unity, we want to help people find us. Help people find out who we are and what we're about. So I want to, I'm going to, in a 20-minute talk, you can barely scratch the surface, but I wanted to help provide some insight and inspire you maybe to want to dig deeper. But first and foremost, metaphysics. What is it? Well, in a very simple way, meta means beyond. So it means beyond the physical. It means not a literal interpretation, but looking beyond for a deeper meaning of things. Not just staying at the surface, but going deeper. And we see the word metaphysics or metaphysical used a lot of different places in different ways. And, the truth is, it is a branch of philosophy that's concerned with the fundamental nature of reality and being. You can take a college course in metaphysics. You can take a lot of courses if you are a philosophy major, but it's always about exploring what's beyond the physical senses. So, I think even Mary Beth talked last week a little bit about what is spirituality. When we're going to talk about the spiritual meaning of the eclipse, spiritual has to do with the nature of God, which, on one hand I see the face of God in everyone, but God, what is God? And how do we talk about it? And what is the nature of humankind? And how do things work in the world? So that's in the broadest sense. But, it's also true that Jesus was a metaphysician. That this is what he taught, helping us having a greater understanding about the nature of God and the nature of humankind. And Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, I've always loved this. He said, unity is a link in the great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus Christ. And so I think what he was saying there is that Jesus, first and foremost, was a teacher. And in Unity, our approach to education, traditionally in a school, most schools, it's like there's all this information and facts and data, and you go to school and you memorize the facts and the dates, and you go take a test and you put it, fill out the forms and prove that you've absorbed all this fact. Whereas the other approach to education, educate, means drawing forth from within you, that there's a difference between facts and knowledge and wisdom and understanding. And our approach to education is helping people draw upon that inner wisdom that is already within you to draw that forth. And so there's a fellow named Mark Hicks, and he's a Unity minister, and he has made it really his life's work and his ministry to create a website that has so many resources for learning and going so much deeper in Unity and helping to communicate about what is metaphysical Christianity. And he says this, that metaphysical Christianity is an authentic and distinct expression of the historic Christian faith. And he goes on to say that metaphysical Christianity and evangelical Christianity are really two ends of a spectrum, a continuum of Christian history and theology. One is focused more on a literal interpretation of the Bible. One is focused on Jesus as the adoration of the divinity of Jesus, the Son of God, on putting him at the right hand of God. And the other, Unity, is focused on metaphysical Christianity, is looking at the deeper meanings and seeing Jesus as our teacher and our way shower. That Eric Butterworth said Jesus is the great example, not the great exception. And so these are just distinctions, not that either is right or wrong or better or worse, but that to say that unity has a place at the table in Christianity, that there's more than one approach to things. And I think the reason it's important for us to understand this is that we want to invite people who may be looking for this approach or for whom this resonates to come and be part of our Unity Church, that find people for whom this fits. Oh, this makes sense to me. This is what I believe, or at least to be able to say, well, these are new ideas. This is a new thought that I've never heard before about Christianity and the Bible, and I'm willing to entertain some new thoughts or new ideas, or tell me a little more about this. So another place where we see the word metaphysics used a lot, so this is his website, truthunity.net, and so, for those that want to delve deeper. But another place where we see metaphysics referred to a lot is with New Age. Who's been to a metaphysical bookstore? All of us. Anybody who hasn't, you can raise. And what do you typically see at a metaphysical bookstore? Oh, come on. Crystals, tarot cards, channeling, astrology. I got this bracelet. It's got a lotus. I really like the one because it had the lotus flower representing Buddhism. Things that reflect Eastern traditions, Om, symbols, tapes, Namaste, things that might say Namaste, books, bumper sticker. most of us have a lot of stuff. I've got crystals at home. And so New Age is really a broad category of things, of spiritual groups and practices and philosophies. I know some people refer to it as kind of a hodgepodge of things. And some people think of unity and New Thought as being sort of a more systematic approach that they both have long traditions. I mean, the kind of things you often see at a metaphysical bookstore, things relating to witchcraft and paganism and things that go back hundreds, thousands of years as well. To me, the kind of the distinction I always make with when I think about these things and whether I decide to buy a crystal or a set of tarot cards is it's something that helps me to find my own inner voice? Or is it something that's putting the authority outside of myself? Oh, well, if this channeler said this, then I guess that's my life. This is going to happen tomorrow. Or, there's nothing wrong with channeling, but things like these I find are only helpful if it helps me turn inward to find my own answers. If it helps me to, if instead it encourages me to be dependent on an outer authority, then for me it's not as useful. But so when you see a metaphysical bookstore, it's a little bit different than what we're talking about here. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is metaphysical Bible interpretation, which is, I think, what a lot of people are wanting to know about. And, it goes beyond the literal words to find a deeper spiritual meaning, which I think some of these other things do as well. In unity, we think of the Bible as not just a historical document, but as a living text with layers of spiritual meaning. And it really describes the evolution of human consciousness and our collective journey. So an approach that metaphysical Bible interpretation, as we practice it in unity, considers the symbolic and the allegorical aspects of Scripture and seeking ways to uncover universal truths that will be really directly relevant in our own lives. So obviously this is a key component of our unity belief system, and I often try to include an example of it in my lessons every Sunday. But here's an example of a story that I came upon. Imagine a young man, I don't know, his name could be Michael, who he's rummaging around in his grandma's attic, stumbles upon his old grandma's Bible. It's old and it's dusty, and a family Bible. It's worn with age. The pages are yellowed and fragile. And he starts to flip through it, and the pages just flop open. Sometimes they say just take a book and flop it open, see what's on that page. Maybe that's what you're meant to. And he flops open to the story about David and Goliath. At first glance, he realized, oh, this is a familiar story. I've heard this before about the young shepherd boy defeating this huge giant with a sling and a stone. But then he reads a little further and he sees it in a new light. And he thinks about how David, although maybe he's a historical figure and maybe the story happened, maybe it didn't, maybe it happened that way or not, but he realizes that David represents the spiritual qualities of faith and courage within each of us. And he realizes that Goliath, the giant, represents any kind of insurmountable challenge or fears that we face. Maybe it's a diagnosis or worried about something or a loved one, and metaphysically he begins to think about that story in this, whether it's a physical battle or whether it's the story of our own spiritual triumph. I mean, who here hasn't faced in life some really challenge that just felt like, oh, this is really huge. How am I going to get through this? And the sling and the stone in the story are not just weapons, but we can think of them as metaphors for our own inner resources, faith and determination. And I'd like to think spiritual community and our ability to overcome, to face something that feels like it's huge when we feel like we're kind of small and, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? So with this new understanding, Michael makes a new friend with the Bible, and he discovers there's a way to tap into timeless wisdom. So as I said, that's just an example of a story in the Bible where we could spend a lot of time talking about faith. How do I connect with some spiritual qualities within me that help me to face some big challenge? And what does this tell me? What do I have as resources for my sling and my stone to be present to that? So metaphysical Bible interpretation involves asking questions, drawing upon answers, but here's some key points to know, is that it has a long historic tradition. This isn't something that Unity made up or that Charles Fillmore thought of. Metaphysical Bible interpretation is as old as the Bible itself. It goes back thousands of years. It draws upon Greek ideas from ancient Greek philosophy. They use these methods when they'd be reading stories about Greek mythology and crazy, wild, outrageous stories. You can think about, how did Socrates teach? Yeah, I was going to say, have you ever heard of the Socratic method? He didn't say, okay, here's the answers, here's your points, just do this. And he asked questions that drew the answers, and Jesus did that. Or he gave them a story, a parable, that you have to go home and scratch your head and think, talk to each other. So it's a method of teaching that draws, that the most important thing is that last point. It relies on our inner knowingness as authority for spiritual matters, not on that this, read it literally and this is the answer, or that you or me or somebody has the right answer. And it's all about consciousness. Metaphysical interpretation is about consciousness, self-discovery, finding ourselves in the story in each character. And it uses a particular intuitive process to help understand that better. So, David represents a state of consciousness. Goliath represents a state of consciousness. Our state of consciousness changes from moment to moment, from days. Sometimes I can be worried about something, and by the end of the day, it's like, oh, that worked out really well. Why was I so worried about it, Or I can be confident facing a situation or a challenge, or I can be filled with faith, or I can be imagining possibilities. But basically, interpreting the Bible is a process of being open to spiritual illumination from within. And so, now I'm going to share with you a quote that to me was a game changer. It was a life-changing, and it takes a while to really take this in. But Imelda Octavia Shanklin, don't you just love that name? She was a Unity author in the 20s and 30s, worked at Unity Village. But she said this about the Bible, and let me read it to you. I do not know why the Bible is written in symbolisms which mystify the casual reader and befog the literal mind. I thought befog. But two things I know for sure about its text: that the book was written out of the mind of God, and he or she who asks the mind of God to think in them will come to know what the book means. And then she goes on to say, to those who come with minds dulled with opinions. You know, if you've already got your mind made up, or there's only one right way, then it's going to be a cryptic oracle, unintelligible, disappointing. You know, who here has read a passage out of the Bible and you think, oh, what is that? You know, what were they thinking? That's why for most people their Bible is a book. They use it as a doorstop and not a friendly place to open regularly. But to those whose spiritual thirst has been, it says, to those whose spiritual thirst has been perverted by creeds. You know, meaning that, you know, you've been biased by, you know, by things that you've been told that you have to memorize and believe. Then the Bible is a sealed font from which no life-reviving tide can pour. But to those who apply to it as a written message from the mind of God, the book actually thinks its own meaning. And while they thus read, it's not the human mind seeking to know, it's God's mind knowing itself. That is, to me, really profound. Really profound. And that's what has kept me excited and loving unity for, I don't know how many years, 40 years, 30 years, that it's a living document, and there's always something new to be revealed, to be understood, that I'm not anywhere near the edge of the limitation of human knowledge and understanding, because there's always more. That when we seek to connect with the mind of God, with infinite understanding, you know, every day you can pick up the same passage and see something new in it, or have it speak to you in a different way. And so it's that there's something in us, there's a divine impulse, I think, that is always causing us to seek a deeper understanding, a deeper experience. So, that's a lot. I wish I could just print it out. If you want a copy, I'll give it to you. But that says to me a lot about what unity metaphysical interpretation is about. So, also I heard somebody say last Sunday in a wonderful talk, she said, look for signs and symbols as we go into this. We're getting ready for the solar eclipse. I think Mary Beth said, look for signs, you know, things have a deeper meaning. And that's what metaphysical Bible interpretation is about as well, is knowing that the characters and the places represent different phases of consciousness, that everything has a deeper meaning. Numbers have a meaning, you know, 3 or 40 or 6 or 12, you know, that all of these things have meaning. And so I want to just show you very simply, and then we're going to get into an example. But the interpretive process, very simply, is first, before you open the Bible, and you can use this really with any book or anything, is prepare yourself. You know, get spiritually centered, or say a prayer, or affirm, let there be light. And then read the passage. And I like to read it 2 or 3 times, or maybe read it out loud to myself, you know, walk around the room and read, or pretend I'm reading it, you know, and then read it quietly, because you want to kind of feel the energy of the words and the history, and read different versions. You know, there's Unity uses the New Revised Standard Version, but there are many versions of the Bible, and there's websites where you can find the same passage in about 4 or 8 or 10 or 12 versions, and each gives a little different nuance. And then pull out individual words and key phrases and interpret them. Break it down. That's where these books are good. This is the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, the works of Charles Fillmore. Every word, every name of a person, and every place that is mentioned in the Bible is in this book with a metaphysical meaning to it. And, and so that's huge. And so look it up, or just ask yourself, what does that just intuitively, what does this word mean? And then just take some time to meditate or reflect on what, allow a message to be revealed to you. And then personal relevance. Well, how does this relate to me in my life right now, or what's going on in the world? So, in doing all this, the best thing to do is practice, to practice and do it, take classes, and I'm sorry we're not doing a regular Bible study all the time, but this is what we do in classes, is practice these steps, practice these things. And I thought we could do a couple little practice rounds right here. Are you up for it? Or okay. So here's a phrase, here's a passage, and I use this when I teach classes online. I'll be really honest with you. I have no idea if this passage is really in the Bible or not. But as I've thought about it, I think it ought to be if it's not. So here's a simple one to start with. Peter and John went up the mountain. So I think it ought to be in the Bible. So each of the disciples, the followers of Jesus, represent spiritual qualities within ourselves. We talk about that with the 12 powers. So Peter represents faith. Great. And John represents love. Good. So we've got faith and love, and those are qualities that we all have within us. So then there's some action in this phrase. It says he went up. It doesn't say he went down in the valley, he drove across the street. He went up. So we might think metaphysically, what is that? Rising up in consciousness. And then mountain. That's kind of a word we could look up in the revealing word. But what does a mountain represent spiritually? Light? Life, yeah, that's good, yeah. A challenge. But when you're at the top of the mountain, you're at kind of the summit. I like to think like, we talk about like a mountaintop experience, that when you're at the top of a mountain, you can see much further, wow, the world's a big place. Or, the one suggestion is an exalted state of consciousness, a spiritual point of view, that I can look at my life and won't be really worried about this and this, or I can look at it spiritually. Oh, everything is really just perfect, things are. So we put these things together, faith and love, rising up, exalted state of consciousness. What we might say that when faith and love come together, or faith and love together, lift us up to see things more clearly from an exalted point of view or a spiritual point of view. Faith and love lift us up. Yeah, Mary Beth? Oh. Oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Anybody? So then there's two questions we want to ask. How does this relate to my life, or what's going on for me? How does this relate to the world? So you can think about, is there any place in your life where calling upon your inner resources of faith and love would help you to be lifted up, to see it from a higher point of view, or to be supported, have a mountaintop experience? Is there anything in your life that you're, we can... Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So I wish I'd given you the mic, but for the benefit of people who might not have heard that, Claudia was saying, looking at circumstances in the world where we see turmoil or all the problems in the world, if we have faith and love, it helps us to lift it up to see that even in the midst of that, something good's going to come out of this, or that I can be inspired in some way to do something that will make a difference. Yeah. Okay. Have you finished? This is great. I love it, Claude. So she's saying then we're not part of the problem, we're part of the solution, which is what. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Totally. Yeah. So can you see how one sentence with not too many words, and this is could be a typical passage in the Bible, can give us inspiration for how to live our lives or be in the world with all the things that are going on. Any other? Tom? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, faith and love, up the mountain, completing a goal. Somebody working on writing a book, maybe, or so. Thank you.
Facing an illness.
Facing an illness.
That's a real.
Or aging-related things. Sometimes our body parts don't work as well as they used to.
Maturing.
We're maturing. We are maturing. We're like fine wine. Yeah. Oh, I heard a joke. Somebody said they found $20 in the parking lot. They didn't know what to do with it. And they said, "Oh, I'll do what Jesus would have done. Turned it into wine." I'm sorry. I just heard that yesterday. Oh, that's good. Maybe one or two. Okay. Oh, golly. So there was one other passage. So what I wanted to tell you is that this Mark Hicks, part of his life works has been to take all the commentary from Charles Fillmore and other Unity authors on metaphysical. There are Bible commentaries you can get at Barnes & Noble and everywhere from all different kinds of approaches. But he has taken all of that and published he's created the Fillmore Study Bible Society, and they've come out with a New Testament that has all of the commentary right here. So I won't, as I said, we're not going to read the whole thing this morning. But there was one other passage, because the daily word is healing. And I wanted to, in the book of Acts, chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. You can go home and look it up and read it later. But Peter and John are going up to the temple at the hour of prayer. And a certain man who was lame, I forgot to say, let there be light. Let there be light. Okay, thanks for reminding me. So Peter and John are going up to the temple at the hour of prayer. And a certain man who was lame from his mother's womb was carried every day up to the door of the temple and laid there at what is called the Temple Beautiful. And every day he would ask for gifts for the needy of those who entered the temple. But on this one day, Peter and John stepped up to the temple and he asked them for gifts. I'm just paraphrasing right now. And they stopped, they looked at him intently, and they said, "Silver and gold we have none to give you, but what I can give you, but what we give you is of much greater value. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, get up and walk. And Peter took him by the hand, raised him up, and immediately he was able to stand. His feet and his ankles were made strong, and he leaped up with joy, and he entered with them. He walked with Peter and John into the temple, leaping and praising God. So, very quickly, I just want to say Peter and John, faith and love. And at the temple is the place of spiritual understanding. And literally, he's at the threshold. He's at the door. Sometimes we're that way in our life. We're at the threshold of a breakthrough, but we haven't quite figured out how to go from one state of consciousness to the next. But every day we keep coming back to repeating the same. Maybe today will be the day. And the man is lame. Lame simply means the thoughts. We have lame thoughts sometimes. The thought that I can't move forward, or I'm not good enough, or I'll never heal this issue, or why do I keep bumping up against the same thing again? But he's at the gate, which is the threshold to transformation. And it's like we're told that Peter looks at him intently. So it's like something happened that he looked and he saw himself mirrored back in them, or he recognized the qualities of faith and love that Peter and John represented in himself. And then they said, we can't give you silver and gold. Sometimes we think the answer is outer stuff. If I could just get more money, or if I could get this or that, or somebody would. But their answer was that something even greater. And what they're saying is Christ consciousness in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. That when we take on that consciousness, when we connect with that consciousness, we're able, and then the man experiences a healing. He's able to stand up and walk. And to me, it's very insightful that it says he walked with them into the temple. He didn't say, okay, I'm healed now. I'm going a different direction. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to the bar and hang out with my friends, or I'm going to go have a party. He walked with. Walking forward. What does it mean to walk with faith and love in our lives? To have those be our daily companions, so that whatever comes up, we're walking with. And he walked across the threshold into the temple. Charles Fillmore says here in the commentary, the door of the temple metaphysically represents spiritual understanding. The door opens when we pray and praise or meditate. Seeing Peter and John, there must be faith on the part of the one who is to be healed, and that the power of the Christ to restore him lies in himself, in ourselves, and that we can call forward faith and love as avenues of healing. And so, anyway, so what I wanted to, so this is just a little sample of what's possible. And, there's metaphysical interpretation, and then there's what we call maieutic interpretation, which is a Greek term meaning drawing forth from within. And so it's basically, it means one looking at what happened in the story, metaphysically interpreting it, but then saying, well, how does this relate to the world? Where do I see this going on in the world? And how does this relate to what's going on in my life? Where am I at a threshold? Where is the world at a threshold? Lonnie and Melly keep talking about in the Spirit Group series that we're on the verge of an awakening, that we are at a threshold. And how can we, with faith and love, get up and walk through the threshold into the temple of greater understanding? So we've covered a lot of territory here in 20 minutes, or maybe more. But the two most important things I want you to remember is metaphysical, means beyond the physical. Means looking at deeper spiritual meanings. And that in unity, our approach in metaphysics is relying on an inner knowing. That it's a process of contemplation, of questions, of study, of looking at deeper spiritual meanings to find the answers within ourselves that we've done, and to do it together collectively. That's what makes Bible study fun, is that you can do this on your own by yourself, but when you do it in a group, everybody adds something to it, and then it creates, the sum is greater than the parts of the whole, I guess. So I'm hoping now that we can say together, and there has been light, that there's been a little bit of light on this subject, and we can continue to go even deeper with it.